Welcome back to Talk Tickers, the show that takes those earnings calls and, breaks them down, makes them a little easier to digest. And today we're diving into Pan American Silver's Q3 2024 earnings. And I got to say, there's a lot to talk about.
Absolutely. There's a lot going on with Pan American this quarter. It's definitely got people on Wall Street talking, that's for sure.
Yeah, no kidding. So let's just jump right in. Pan American, they just blew past their old records for both revenue and cash flow this quarter. We're talking $716.1 million in revenue, $235.8 million in operating cash flow, and free cash flow hit $151.5 million. I mean, that's a lot of green.
Yeah, those are some seriously impressive numbers, especially when you consider they've got another $30 million coming in from finished goods and inventory sales that are going to be recognized a little later down the line. This is really, this kind of shows you how strong gold and silver prices are doing right now.
Yeah, for sure. Precious metals have been, they've been hot lately. But Pan American, they're not just riding the wave. They've got a really solid balance sheet to back it all up. They ended the quarter with almost $470 million in cash and short-term investments. That's a big jump from last quarter. And their net debt, well, that's down to a very manageable $376.2 million. I mean, they are in a strong position.
You got that right. A healthy balance sheet. That's what gives a company the flexibility to make those smart moves and ride out any potential bumps in the road.
Well, speaking of smart moves, let's talk about La Colorado, their mine down in Mexico. It sounds like that was the real star of the show this quarter. What exactly happened there?
Well, La Colorado, they really stepped up big time. They had a 59% increase in silver production compared to last quarter. And their cash costs, those dropped by 26%. Remember that new ventilation infrastructure they finished up back in July? It looks like it's finally paying off.
Oh, yeah. I remember them talking about that bottleneck on some of the previous calls.
Yeah.
So they finally got that sorted out.
They did. And that new infrastructure has really boosted their throughput rates. They hit an average of 1,800 tons per day in October, and they're aiming for 2,000 tons per day by the end of the year. So that means more production, lower costs. It's a recipe for success.
Absolutely. So La Colorado is doing great, but no company has a perfect quarter, right? So where did they hit a few snags?
Well, silver might have been a home run, but gold production faced some challenges this quarter. Cerro Moro, their mine in Argentina, that one got hit pretty hard by winter weather, caused some delays and higher dilution than they planned for in the underground operations. And then on top of that, they had a heavy rainfall over at Minera, Florida, which slowed down development of some high-grade gold zones.
So Mother Nature decided to throw a wrench in the works.
Mm-hmm.
But it sounds like these are just temporary setbacks, not something bigger, right?
Right. It seems that way. Pan American's already working on solutions. They're focused on getting production up from the natty zone at Cerro Moro and getting back on track with development at Minera, Florida. They seem confident they can make up for the lost production.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. But let's shift gears for a second away from operations. Pan American made some big strategic moves this quarter. They sold off one mine, and there's talk of a potential partnership on another. It's like they're playing 4D chess or something. What can you tell us about these moves?
Definitely thinking long-term, that's for sure. First, they got the okay to sell their La Arena mine in Peru. Should be finalized later this quarter. They're getting $245 million upfront for it, plus a 1.5% royalty on the La Arena, the second project, and a potential $50 million bonus if it hits commercial production.
Wow. Okay, so they're getting a nice chunk of change and some potential upside there. But what about this partnership for the La Colorado Skarn project? Why is everyone so excited about that one?
Well, Colorado Skarn, that one has the potential to be a real game changer. The latest mineral resource update showed a 53% increase in the indicated mineral resource. It's sitting at a massive 265 million tons right now. And the grades for silver, zinc, and lead, they've all improved. We're talking 309 million ounces of indicated silver and another 59 million in the inferred category.
Wow, those are some big numbers. No wonder they've got potential partners knocking down their door.
Exactly. Pan American, they're playing it smart, though. They're carefully looking at all their options to make sure they get the best deal. This project could be a huge growth driver for them in the future.
I'm starting to get excited myself, and I'm not even a shareholder. But before we go any further, got to remind everyone, this is Talk Tickers, and we are not financial advisors. This is all for informational purposes only.
That's right. We break down the info, but we don't tell you what to do with it.
All right, disclaimer done. Now let's get back to Pan American and their guidance for the rest of the year. Did they give us any updates on their 2024 targets?
They did. They're still on track to hit their 2024 guidance. They said silver production should land somewhere at the lower end of their projected range. That's 21 million to 23 million ounces. And they highlighted a bunch of capital projects that are moving along nicely.
Okay, like what Give us the rundown.
Well, they're putting money into a new filter plant and a tailings storage facility at Huaron. Should be fully up and running by the end of Q1 2025. Then there's the new paste plant project at their Bell Creek mine in Canada that's in the commissioning phase. And down at Jacobina, their flagship gold mine in Brazil, they're upgrading the plant infrastructure and looking into ways to optimize the mine's long-term potential.
So they're not afraid to reinvest in their future. They're playing offense and defense at the same time.
Yeah, that's one way to put it. And this commitment to growth, it's backed up by their latest resource and reserve update. They've replaced mine production with new mineral reserves for 8 years straight now. That's some serious consistency.
8 years in a row, that's incredible. It shows they're thinking long-term and focused on sustainability. You can't talk about Pan American without addressing the elephant in the room, Escobal. What's the latest on that situation?
Yeah, Escobal's been on hold for a while now, and unfortunately there's no restart date in sight yet. The Guatemalan Ministry of Energy and Mines just appointed a new vice minister to oversee the ILO 169 consultation process, which is a big step towards potentially reopening the mine.
So some movement, but still a waiting game.
You got it. The mine's still on care and maintenance, and it's not clear when or even if it'll ever restart. It was a major source of silver for Pan American before all this, so definitely something to keep an eye on.
Okay, well, before we wrap up this first part of our deep dive, we got to do our This Is Not Financial Advice segment. And I have a doozy of a hypothetical trade idea based on what we've talked about today. Get ready for this.
Okay, I'm all ears. Lay it on me.
All right. What if Pan American Silver decided to go all in on silver and spun off their gold operations into a separate entity? Think they could unlock even more value for investors that way? I know it's a bold move, maybe even a little crazy, but in this market, who knows?
Whoa, that is a pretty radical idea. It would definitely shake things up in the precious metals market, but, it's an interesting thought for sure.
Right. It'd be like creating two powerhouses, each focused on their own metal.
Yeah.
It's risky, definitely risky, but the potential payoff could be huge. Imagine the market reaction.
Yeah, I can see the headlines now. It'll be a sight to see.
Of course, this is all just speculation. Folks, do your own research, talk to a financial advisor, all that good stuff. We're just having a little fun here.
Yeah.
But seriously, how wild would that be?
Pretty wild indeed. It makes you wonder what other tricks Pan American might have up their sleeve.
Well, that's a question for part 2 of our deep dive. Stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back after a quick break.
All right, so let's dig a little deeper into Pan American's operations. There were some interesting details in the earnings call transcript that I think are worth a closer look.
Okay, I'm all for getting into the weeds a bit. What caught your eye?
Well, one thing they mentioned that they wrapped up mining at Dolores in Q3, and they've been processing lower-grade stockpiles since July. It's a pretty common move when a mine's nearing the end of its life.
Yeah, getting the last bit of value out of it before moving on. Makes sense. What else did you notice?
They talked about their cash costs for the silver segment being a little higher than expected in Q3. There were a few things that contributed to that lower gold byproduct credits from Cerro Moro, some catch-up spending at La Colorada and Huaron, and higher royalty costs at San Vicente. Kind of a bunch of small things that added up.
Yeah, mining, it's not always smooth sailing. Unexpected things pop up like those weather delays at Cerro Moro, and they can have a ripple effect on the financials.
Exactly. It shows you how unpredictable things can be in the mining industry, but it also shows how Pan American is pretty good at handling these challenges.
Okay, so they're rolling with the punches. Now let's go back to those capital projects for a minute, specifically the Huaron filter plant. They said it'll be fully operational by early 2025. For those of us who aren't mining experts, can you break down what a filter plant does and why this investment is a big deal?
Sure. So a filter plant, it's really important for mines that use tailings disposal. Tailings are basically the waste left over from the mining process, and they usually get mixed with water and stored in these big ponds. A filter plant removes a lot of that water from the tailings.
Okay, and what's the advantage of that? Sounds like extra work to me.
Oh, it's definitely worth it for a few reasons. First, it makes those tailings ponds a lot safer. Less risk of them failing, which can be really bad for the environment. Nobody wants that kind of negative attention.
Yeah, that makes sense. Anything else?
Yeah, a couple other things. When you dewater the tailings, they take up less space, so the storage facility doesn't need to be as big, and you can recover more water to reuse in the mining process. So it's good for the environment, and it saves them money.
So a win-win situation, safer, more sustainable, and potentially more cost-efficient. Sounds like Pan American's taking responsible mining pretty seriously.
They are. They're investing in technologies that make them more efficient and reduce their impact on the environment. It's something we're seeing more and more in the mining industry these days.
Now, what about that paste plant project at their Bell Creek mine? Remember they said it'll let them mine more ore for every meter of development. How does that work?
So the paste plant uses this technique called paste backfill. Imagine you're digging a tunnel to get to the ore. You'd normally have to leave these pillars of rock to hold up the roof. With paste backfill, you can fill those spaces with a mixture of tailings and a binding agent, usually cement. It basically creates a really strong support structure.
So it's like filling a hole with concrete, but using mining waste instead. Pretty clever.
Exactly. And it lets them mine more of the ore without compromising safety, so they get more out of every meter they dig.
Makes sense. So it sounds like Pan American is always looking for new ways to improve and innovate. Now, they also mentioned upgrading the plant infrastructure at their Jacobina mine in Brazil. What's going on there?
Yeah, Jacobina, that's their flagship gold mine. So they're putting a lot of money into it. They're increasing the capacity and efficiency of the processing plant so it can handle more ore as they explore and develop new areas of the mine.
Sounds like they've got big plans for Jacobina. Did they say anything about their long-term strategy for the mine?
Yeah, they're doing a study to figure out how to maximize Jacobina's economic potential and growth over the long term. They should release that study in the first half of 2025. They're looking at everything from new mining techniques to potential expansion opportunity. They really want to get the most out of this asset.
That makes sense. And remember, this is all on top of their already impressive performance. Their latest resource update showed they replaced mine production with new mineral reserves for the 8th year in a row. They also added 1.2 million ounces of new gold-inferred mineral resources through exploration.
Yeah, they're on a roll, for sure. It shows how committed they are to exploration and how good they are at finding new resources to replace what they're mining. Jacobina's definitely got a bright future.
Okay, now let's circle back to the Colorado Skarn project. We talked about the huge resource potential earlier, but what's the latest on those potential partnerships?
Well, there's definitely a lot of interest in this project. Pan American has done a great job making it less risky, which makes it really attractive to potential partners. They're taking their time, though, carefully evaluating all the options to make sure they find the right fit.
That's smart. No need to rush into anything. It shows they're thinking strategically. A good partnership could really unlock the full potential of this project.
Absolutely. It could be a real game changer for their growth. But before we get too carried away with all the possibilities, we need to think about the bigger picture, too. The overall economic situation.
Right, the macro environment. That can have a huge impact on a mining company no matter how well they're doing otherwise.
Exactly. Inflation, interest rates, currency fluctuations, global demand, all those things play a role. Investors need to keep an eye on the macroeconomic landscape, especially when they're looking at mining companies.
It's all connected. And speaking of connections, I think this ties in nicely with our This Is Not Financial Advice segment for this part of our deep dive.
Oh, okay. I'm intrigued. What kind of crazy idea are you cooking up now?
So we've been talking about Pan American's strategic moves, their focus on growth, their success with exploration. What if, and I know this sounds wild, what if they went on a huge acquisition spree?
An acquisition spree? Now that would be bold.
Right? Think about it. They're in a strong financial position.
Yeah.
The precious metals market is doing great, and they've shown they can handle acquisitions well. What if they use this opportunity to buy up some smaller, undervalued mining companies?
Yeah, that would definitely be a way to expand their portfolio quickly and potentially boost their production and reserves. They could become a real mining giant.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But of course, there are risks. Acquisitions can be tricky, and you could end up overpaying or running into unexpected problems.
True, it's a high-risk, high-reward strategy. But wouldn't it be something to see Pan American make a move like that?
It would definitely shake things up.
Yeah.
But just to be clear, this is all hypothetical. We're just having some fun exploring the possibilities.
Of course. This is not financial advice. We're just a couple of podcasters throwing out some crazy ideas.
All right, disclaimer out of the way. Now let's move on to the final part of our deep dive, where we'll wrap things up and share some closing thoughts on Pan American Silver. Stick around. All right, so we've covered a ton of ground today. Record financials, potential partnerships, the whole 9 yards. But before we wrap up our deep dives into Pan American Silver, I think there's something we should touch on, something that sometimes gets lost in all the talk about numbers and profits.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's easy to forget that there are actual people behind all of this, people working hard in some tough conditions to get these metals out of the ground.
Exactly. And it seems like Pan American gets that. They've got a pretty good track record when it comes to ESG, environmental, social governance stuff. They're investing in the communities where they operate, hiring locally supporting social programs, and really trying to minimize their impact on the environment.
It's definitely good to see a company that's taking that stuff seriously, not just focusing on profits, but also thinking about the people and the planet. It's all part of building a sustainable business in the long run.
Couldn't agree more. So any final thoughts before we sign off?
Well, I'd say if you're looking for a company that's really doing things right, Pan American Silver is worth checking out. They've got strong assets, a solid balance sheet, and a clear vision for the future. They're definitely a company to keep an eye on in the precious metals world.
Well said. All right, folks, before we go, got to do our usual, this is not financial advice disclaimer. We've had some fun today exploring all sorts of hypothetical scenarios, but remember, these are just our opinions, not investment recommendations.
Right. Always do your own research.
Exactly. Do your homework, talk to a financial advisor, and make informed decisions. And until next time, happy investing.